Every day, hundreds of men put on their suits, force a smile, and go out to silently die. Not on a battlefield, but in offices, lifeless marriages, and dark rooms where no one asks if they're okay. They slowly destroy themselves, with cigarettes, alcohol, endless work hours, and the heavy weight of silence. And the most tragic part? No one notices. Or worse, many applaud. They call it strength. It's a pain so deep that because it's so common, it's become invisible. Do you know these men? Maybe you are one of them. Men who pay every bill but can't buy 30 minutes of peace. Who support families, businesses, responsibilities, but can barely hold their own bodies upright. From an early age, they were told a real man doesn't cry, doesn't complain, doesn't need comfort. He just endures. Endures until he explodes or disappears. Most suicides worldwide are committed by men. Most workplace deaths affect men. Most preventable illnesses that kill also take men. Yet, almost no one talks about it. Nietzsche wrote that suffering needs to be transformed into something greater. But what happens when there's no space for that transformation? When pain doesn't turn into art, philosophy, or catharsis, only into an ulcer, a stroke, a breakdown between two emails? This video is not a call for help. It's a punch, a dive into the depths of the male soul, one trained not to feel. We will walk alongside Nietzsche through this abyss step by step, revealing what lies behind the idea of strength. What we find is not courage, but grief swallowed in silence and unnamed exhaustion, a masculinity built at the cost of amputating its own soul. Here, don't expect motivational phrases. What you'll hear is the truth many men have never had room or permission to say. Watch until the end, not for me, but for that man who might be beside you right now, dying inside while keeping up the appearance that everything is fine. A man may be bleeding internally, his body on the verge of collapse, his mind screaming for help, and yet he will still go to work, take his child to school, fix what broke at home. And what do they say about him? He's strong, an example. But this is what society celebrates, denying pain as if it were a virtue. This is not strength. It's one of the most tragic masks a human can wear. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche talks about two principles that govern existence. Apollo, representing reason, control, and form, and Dionysus, the symbol of chaos, emotion, and ecstasy. Western culture has kneeled before Apollo, and because of that, modern men have learned to live like rational statues, containing everything vibrant, alive, and unstable inside themselves. Masculinity has been shaped in Apollo's image, firm, controlled, aesthetically beautiful, even if that beauty hides suffering. But absolute control is not freedom. It's a prison. Men learn to play the role of stability, even when they are falling apart inside. They became symbols of order, in the home, in business, in society, but had to give up the right to be vulnerable, confused, emotional. Nietzsche wrote, "All that is profound loves the mask." This phrase is not praise, it's a warning. Depth that needs a mask is suffocating. And here lies the true tragedy. Culture applauds the man who endures everything in silence, who bears losses, grief, betrayals, and failures without breaking, who smiles and says, "I'm fine." But that silence has a price: physical, mental, spiritual. Psychological research shows men have more difficulty identifying and expressing emotions, a condition called alexithymia. But this is not a genetic flaw. It is the result of a lifetime of social conditioning. Boys don't learn to name their emotions, they learn to swallow them. If they cry, they are reprimanded. If they stumble, they become a joke. If they feel too much love, they are called weak. So the mask becomes skin, and pain becomes silence. In practice, this emptiness reveals itself in self-destructive behaviors: daily alcohol use, pornography as escape, endless work hours, senseless outbursts of aggression, emotionally distant relationships. These are unconscious attempts to numb what never had a voice. Look at the numbers. Middle-aged male suicide rates are alarming. Many had homes, families, careers, and yet chose to leave. Was something missing? On the outside, no. What was missing was permission to be imperfect inside. Nietzsche didn't advocate abandoning pain, but its transformation. One must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. But how can any star be born when chaos is denied from childhood? The aesthetics of strength may look beautiful on the outside. Inside, it's a museum of broken bones, muffled screams, men who became pillars and forgot they are also human. The worst loneliness is not the absence of company, but the absence of existence. Millions of men live this every day. In marriages where they are emotional extras, jobs where they are mere cogs, friendships that never go beyond the surface. Society trains them to be useful but never invites them to be human. Thus, loneliness becomes routine, a nameless pain that echoes day after day. Nietzsche proposed the experiment of eternal return. What if you had to live this exact same life with every good, bad, or mundane moment repeatedly for all eternity? Now imagine applying this to the modern man. He wakes up, dresses, fulfills obligations, silences desires, hides fears, tells jokes to mask exhaustion, swallows his tears, and goes to sleep, only to repeat the same script tomorrow, the day after, forever. Male suffering becomes a cycle not because it's inevitable, but because it's been normalized. The lack of deep connections, emotional silence, social indifference to male psychological pain, all of this builds a closed system, a labyrinth, with no exit. It's time to tear off the mask, name the chaos, and let the star finally dance. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how," but more directly, whoever does not have chaos inside them is condemned to revolve around the same misery. This is the portrait of so many men, spinning around the same emptiness, trapped in routines that don't nourish and roles they didn't choose, weighed down by obligations that only pile up. This repetition comes at a high and silent cost. Data reveals a brutal statistic. Men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women. Why? Because they don't talk, they don't ask for help, they don't see a way out, they just repeat. Masculinity has been turned into an emotional concentration camp, where feeling pain is a sign of weakness, and asking for support is seen as cowardice, where hugs have been replaced by handshakes. In the culture of eternal performance, men cannot stop. They are not taught to reflect, only to keep functioning, and this is the most subtle poison, suffering that becomes habit. Men who don't kill themselves all at once, they die slowly. They die in cigarettes that relieve stress, in the Friday beer that brings peace, in the silent addiction to pornography, in the anesthesia of indifference. Nietzsche never wrote for the complacent. He wrote for those who bleed in silence and still dare to ask, is there another way? And the answer lies in the harshest truth. You don't have to keep living a life you don't deserve to live again. Breaking the cycle requires seeing it clearly. It requires naming the abyss and having the courage to reject the routine that makes you sick. Eternal return is not punishment, it's a test of authenticity. If your life is not worth repeating, then something must change. Now. There is a generation of men who don't suffer because they have already given up on feeling. They don't cry, don't rebel, don't dream. They just function. Work, come, home, watch something, drink a beer, have soulless sex, and call that life. They aren't dead, but they don't live either. They are stabilized, anesthetized, heart in coma, spirit in economy mode. Nietzsche described this figure with chilling accuracy in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The last man doesn't seek meaning. He runs from pain, avoids chaos, depth, and growth. He only wants comfort, stability, and small pleasures that don't move him. The irony is bitter. Heirs of millennia of effort and civilization, modern men have become prisoners of their own comfort zones. But this comfort doesn't bring joy, only the absence of pain. And that's not happiness, it's numbness. They traded the risk of living for emotional guarantees, deep love for functional relationships, creative chaos for safe routines. And they call this maturity. Nietzsche didn't see the last man as a villain, but as a symptom, a predictable consequence of a culture that fears suffering more than death itself. The problem is that by avoiding pain, we also avoid life's transformative power. Male emotional anesthesia is an invisible epidemic. Men who can't access their own anger in a healthy way, so they project it. Men who don't know how to love deeply, so they hide behind performance. Men who don't feel genuine pride and live enslaved by the need for external validation. Contemporary studies in neuropsychology show that chronic emotional repression affects more than just mood. It erodes memory, weakens the immune system, and impairs the ability to make complex decisions. In other words, denying what one feels is signing the bankruptcy of the self. And, paradoxically, society rewards this behavior. The man who doesn't complain, who doesn't cry, who doesn't feel too much. That is the ideal man. But ideal for whom? For the market, for the gears of power, for shallow, convenient, and predictable emotional relationships. This is precisely the point Nietzsche hammers with brutality. The last man represents the end of greatness, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. He is the burial of the tragic, the sublime, the human who dared to desire more. He abandoned great longings. He prefers a little poison now and then, just enough to produce pleasant dreams, and in the end, a gentle death. The last man does not kill himself. He simply stops fighting for something worthwhile. He begins to exist on a straight line. No highs, no abysses, just a comfortable and eternal boredom. There are no open wounds, no screams, no tears. The tragedy is quieter, a heart that never truly began to beat. Some men do not die. They rot alive, not for lack of strength, but for excess control. They suffocate their impulses, their passions, their pains. They turn their bodies into an aesthetic prison, straight, functional, predictable. And what screams inside? It is silenced, disbelieved, ridiculed. But the chaos locked in the basement does not disappear. It waits, and when it returns, it takes revenge. Nietzsche saw the world as the eternal dance between Apollo and Dionysus. Order versus ecstasy, form versus delirium. Apollo builds, rationalizes, organizes. Dionysus overflows, intoxicates, tears the soul. In tragic ecstasy, culture exalted Apollo in man, balance, control, reason. But it criminalized Dionysus, instinct, surrender, loss of control. And this comes at a price, because there is no fully human being without Dionysus. And that is why male emotional repression becomes illness, a silent, epidemic disease, and legitimized. Men who have never cried bury the pain in their bodies. Men who have never exploded with sincerity suffer from chronic tension. Men who have never allowed themselves to lose control, in an embrace, in a cry, in an act of surrender, are dying slowly. When Dionysus is not accepted, he sneaks in. He appears as constant irritability, as lapses of violence, as physical collapses, as inexplicable betrayals, as existential crises at 40, 50, 60. Nietzsche said, "Life without music would be a mistake." And here, music is not just melody. It is everything that vibrates in the body: desire, art, anger, tenderness, eroticism, fury, laughter. The man who does not dance, metaphorically, is out of life. Society trained men to be predictable, to wear suits of emotional neutrality, to answer everything with a "it's all good," to solve everything with logic. But inside, a Dionysian soul pulses, and it charges dearly when ignored. Psychoanalysis calls this repression. Neuroscience calls it unresolved stress circuits. Philosophy calls it denial of the tragic. But the phenomenon is the same: a bottled-up vital force ready to explode, or to make its bearer sick. There are men who have never screamed, who have never gone mad with love, who have never gone into a trance witnessing a child's birth, a woman's tears, or a friend's weakness. They live contained. And what is not expressed rots. But Nietzsche also points a way to become who you are, and that demands something rare, the integration of chaos. It is not about being irrational, but allowing the soul to feel, to break, to overflow. With responsibility, yes, but without shame, because there is no dignity in being just a functional statue. True humanity vibrates. To tremble is better than to petrify. Some men need to break. To, for the first time, rebuild themselves with true parts. The pain a man carries can kill him, or awaken him. It all depends on a silent choice made in the loneliest moments, to keep dying in peace, or to be born in conflict. Nietzsche never idealized the balanced, functional, adapted man. On the contrary, his Übermensch, the overman, is one who transcends suffering without denying it, who faces chaos without surrendering to it, who transforms the wound into language, into power, into creation. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. This phrase, later used by Viktor Frankl, is the heart of Nietzschean overcoming. It is not about eliminating pain, but giving it meaning, direction, purpose. The broken man is not condemned. He is naked, and from that nakedness something genuine can be born. But for that it is necessary to stop negotiating with anesthesia. Comfort does not heal. Distraction does not regenerate. Routine does not save. Nietzsche saw suffering as a kind of alchemical furnace. What doesn't kill us can indeed refine us, if we have the strength to go through it. But beware, it doesn't make us morally better. It grounds us, tunes us, forces us to choose between the abyss or reinvention. Men who have survived the bottom of the pit share something in common. They stopped lying to themselves. They embraced weakness, anger, emptiness. And from that, they began to build with real stones. This is what we see in Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning after the concentration camps. This is what echoes in Van Gogh, who transformed his psychic crises into color, light, and plastic fury. This is what Nietzsche did when writing his works with his body, already on the brink of collapse. It's not about romanticizing suffering, but about recognizing that it doesn't have to be an end. It can be a crossing. For this, a man needs to let go of the image and accept the real. Stop trying to be unshakable. Allow himself to be a battlefield where something new can be born. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not the invincible. He is the vulnerable who doesn't surrender. He is the one who integrates pain into his creative process, who dances even when wounded, who carries scars, but doesn't turn them into chains. Today, a new kind of masculinity is gestating, one that doesn't need to deny its own soul to function, one that doesn't rely on silence but on the courage to say what has never been said, one that doesn't repress Dionysus but welcomes him with lucidity. Overcoming is not a ladder. It is a spiral. It passes through the same points, but on higher levels, and each turn demands more truth, more detachment, more power. Perhaps the new man, one who rises from the ashes, is not the one who conquered everything, but the one who, though wounded, never gave up becoming someone worth repeating. In the eternal return. Today there are men collapsing in silence, smiling in photos, leading meetings, embracing their children, while inside there is a cry that has never been heard. This video was made because of them, because of you. For all who at some point felt they had no right to fall. If you have come this far, if you heard every word, if you felt something pulse inside your chest, then know, you have already been part of something important. Your attention is an act of resistance. Your time, your listening, your presence. All of this already helps immensely. Just by being here, watching, commenting, sharing, you are already doing so much. Really, so much. This channel isn't made only by those who record, but by those who listen, feel, and spread the message. Thank you for being here, for being part. of this. Let's keep shouting until no one ever has to shout alone again.